There is, I'm sure there's more, but I want to focus on 5 different things that we should know to build a good deck and to have a good playthrough when playing through Genius Invocation. Today we're going to talk a little bit about TCG, and I'm going to be trying to talk about different tips and tricks that you need to know while building a deck and while playing.
Here in the flesh.
Yeah, that's very interesting, Ito, cutting me off like that. Let's see if Goro behaves a little better than you. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about the different tips and different tricks that you should know before playing TCG, before playing Genius Invocation. A couple of things that everyone that plays any trading card game should know, and also a couple of different strategies that work specifically for this game. There is no sort of ranking system. I'm not sure if I'm the most qualified person to even do this, but having played Yu-Gi-Oh for a very long time and having played Magic and Pokemon and having participated in a few tournaments, I have a general idea on how to build a deck and what to focus when focusing on TCG games, on trading card games. And so I want to pass a few hints and a few tips on stuff that you can do that will certainly improve your deck and improve your playthrough on TCG. So the first thing I want to talk about is one of the most, if not the very most important thing when you're playing any trading card game, is a little thing called hand advantage. You want to have a lot of cards in your hand. That plays out such an important part in any trading card games. But when it comes to Genius Invocation, when it comes to Genshin, it's even more important to have a lot of cards in your hand, because you can just trade the cards for elemental dices, which is priceless, because every single card that you have is gonna have a lot of value. So two of the most important cards that I think that every deck should have is these 2 cards. First off, Strategize, because you can just freely draw 2 cards. I'm not sure if you play Yu-Gi-Oh, but if you play Yu-Gi-Oh, there is a card called Pot of Greed that does exactly the same thing. You draw 2 cards, and that card is so valuable because having hand advantage is such an important thing that they banned the card, because it's one of the most important things in any TCG game is to have hand advantage. So drawing 2 cards for free, trading 1 card for 2 is priceless. I mean, if you could have 5 of these cards, bring them on, please, because you can trade 5 cards for 10 cards. It doubles your hand. Not only it doubles your hand, but also it makes you draw the most important cards. Like you have to have 30 cards, and let's say that you have 1 card that's going to be the most important card for your deck. You want to draw it as fast as possible, and with strategizing cards like this, you can just draw it that much faster. Not only that, there is also this one that I love, which it actually costs 2 elemental dices, but it's well worth it, because not only you can draw 2 cards, but then in the end of the turn, well, at the moment when you use it, you don't draw anything, so it's not very fast, and I'm going to talk about speed in a bit. But what happens is that you draw 2 cards in the end of the turn, and then in the next turn you also draw 2 cards. So it works the same as Strategize. It's a little slower, but it's still very, very, very effective, and that's why it costs 2 elemental dices to use it, because they know it's important. So yeah, that's the very first thing I wanted to talk about: hand advantage. Hand advantage. Focus on cards that give you cards. Now, there is a few cards that I don't really like that also provide good hand advantage. You can have them depending on your strategy, of course, but I don't personally use them because I think they are a little slower than what I like. Shang the Ninth is a really good card. I used to play it. I still do play it in a few of my decks, not all of them. But what happens is that Shang the Ninth depends on physical damage and piercing damage. It depends on whether or not you're going to be doing physical damage and piercing damage. If your strategy points out to you doing a lot of physical damage, um, it's a good card to have. If you're not, if you're focusing more on elemental damage, then it's going to be a little pointless. You're going to depend on the opponent to actually do damage to you for you to get the inspirations you need to draw the cards. So ultimately, it's a really good card to combine with someone who does physical damage a lot. If you're playing a deck that focuses on that, that's great, and you can do that. But in the end of the day, I don't think it's useful if you're going to go for elemental reactions and all that. So that's one card I wanted to talk about, and let's talk about Timmy. What it does is it gives you a free card. It doesn't cost anything to use it. It will give you a free card, but you have to wait 2 turns to get that card. The moment you play it, he gets a pigeon. Once per turn, he gets another pigeon. When he gets to your second turn, actually the third turn after playing the card, you get not only one card, but one Omni Element dice as well. It's good. It's trading 0 for something. You have to wait a little bit for it. But for me, I think what happened, the problem is that you don't get the advantage that you need from it straight away. So you lose a little bit of time. And with that time, you could be using something more useful, something more faster, something stronger. And that brings me to the next point I wanted to make. The second thing that you're gonna be trying to focus when playing this game is speed. Okay, you want to have card advantage, but you also want to be fast. You want to play as fast as possible. And when it comes to being fast, you have got a few different things that you should know about being fast, and I'm gonna play a few games and I'm gonna show you what exactly I mean. But one of the most important things while building the deck that you have to focus on is trying to get rid of cards that are very slow. And I'll give you an example. This card, for example, I think it's great. Liban, it looks cool, it has a few rings, that's awesome. This card suffers from 2 things. Not only you the advantage if you play to the best, and you always want to play to the best, you always want to do everything that you should be doing in every single turn, because every turn is really important. Normally these card games end in 3 or 4 turns, so you have to think, I only have 4 turns, so I need to focus on making every single turn count. If you think about it, the 2 Omni elements that you get from it, you'll only be able to get them next turn. And then the 2 cards that you get, you're only able to get them next turn. So what's the problem with Liban? It can help you on certain occasions, and as I said before, drawing cards and getting hand advantage is important. However, having Liban as the one card that you rely, it makes you have to wait for the 2 cards. It forces you to have to wait to the end of the turn, and at certain times you can't really wait. You have to do something, you have to act, because the faster that you act, the more advantage that you get in this game as well. I see a lot of people that don't focus on attacking fast. They prioritize equipping the character. They want to put a lot of artifacts, a lot of weapons on their characters. And what happens is by the time they can actually do something, 1 or 2 of their characters here is already dead. He can't do anything else. Then the main character that he could use either gets frozen or he gets swiped away, and at the end of the day it doesn't give any advantage. It just it just makes it slower, and it's not an advantage. Another thing I want to talk about related still with speed is that you want to have you want to be careful while you are when you are switching character. Switching character if in this game is really important because you want to be causing elemental reactions. And when switching characters, it costs you one turn to do it. So it's really not ideal. It slows down your turn. It makes you slower. So one thing that I want to talk about is Catherine. Catherine is a really good help for that because you can just put it on the field. It costs 2 elemental dice, and it's 2 elemental dice from different elements, so you don't have to match it so well. It's a little bit more flexible. It's easier to put it out there, and what happens is you can just leave it on the field, and it will help you forever. Every turn you get a free chance to switch from one character to the next without having to waste your turn, and that makes you faster, and speed is important. Two other cards that are really important that I see a lot of people using, and they're using it very well, is Leave It to Me. Leave It to Me also makes you switch a character without spending your turn. And when the crane return just allows you to switch the character right after you do your attack, which is even better in some occasions, because if you have a character that you really want to attack with but that character is dying, you can just equip in this card, make his attack, have him switch, and still be able to use it in the next turn. So it's an advantage. These two cards are really important for any deck, I think. Another thing that you want to be focusing in when you're talking about speed is having the first turn. Having the first turn is really important. You cannot really choose to have the first turn because the game kind of chooses it for you. It's random. But what happens is if you get to have the first turn, it gives you such a great advantage because you're always going to be ahead of your opponent on moves. You can choose to be faster than him. You can choose to switch to whatever character he's going to attack faster than what he can choose to do it. So being the first person to have his turn is really something that's important. It's so important that in some games, let's say for example Yu-Gi-Oh, the halfway through not halfway through, at some point throughout the game of Yu-Gi-Oh, management realized that being the first player to play is a great advantage. So what they do is the opponent that starts secondly, he starts with hand advantage. The first opponent to play, it doesn't get to draw an extra card, and the second opponent who's going to have the second turn, he gets to draw an extra card, so he starts his game with 6 cards, while the first player, the turn player as they call it, starts with 5 cards. And that comes as it balances things out a lot, given the fact that first turn is really important. When you are playing your turn, even if you're starting seconds, and that's random, you cannot choose that, but if you are starting seconds, what you want to try to do is end your fast as soon as possible. Maybe spend your elemental dice using more equip cards than using different attacks, and try to not switch your character as much, and just try to do maybe 1 attack, maximum 2 attacks, and try to end the turn as faster than your opponent, so that in the next turn you can start in the first place faster than him, and that will give you a huge advantage for the next turn, because you're going to be the one in control of the pace of that turn, and that is a great advantage. So that's what I wanted to say about speed. Speed is everything in these kind of games. Another thing I want to talk about is elemental dices. You get the elemental dice kind of randomly, so you have to be really careful when addressing the elemental dice. When you are selecting the characters, and this is important, when you are choosing your characters, if you can somehow choose two characters that share the same element type, two ice characters, two fire characters, it doesn't matter what it is, you will be able to select one of these cards to go into your deck. If you have two pyro characters, you can have two of these little cards, Elemental Resonance, Woven Flames, and what it does is it gives you a free pyro die, and it doesn't cost you anything, it just straight away gives you one more elemental die. And it's really so important, because yes, you lose card advantage, but card advantage is not as important as having the right elemental die. So getting that elemental die of the exact type that you need to do an attack or to do a move or to do a burst, to do whatever you want to do, is really, 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 really important. So if you can, try to choose a deck that has two of the same element characters, okay? When you do that, you will also be able to have a little card depending on what type of elemental type you select. You're gonna be able to get these kind of cards. That's an elemental resonance, either fervent flames, or you have the high voltage, or whatever different effect they have. All of them have a great effect. All of them have specific strategy that you can plan for them. The most brutal one, the most powerful one, I think, is the Fervent Flames, where it does 3 damage. It cost you 1 dice for 3 damage if you time it right, and if you do it right, it's really, really powerful. Water is also really powerful because it heals all of your characters. You know, it depends on your strategy, but you can only have these cards if you really play by the rules and if you have two characters of the same element. So choosing the deck for that is important. Also, when we're talking about the importance of elemental dices, I want to bring up a little event card. If you go into your deck and if you look through the cards that you already have, you are gonna definitely have these two cards. One of them is the Bass's Travel Companion. What it does is it converts elemental dices to whatever you need. Having Omni elemental dice, as you know, gives you a really good advantage because you can match them up with whatever you like, and you can use them on different combos, you can use them on different attacks, so it's really, really priceless to have Omni elements. And being able to trade 2 of your elemental dice for 2 Omni is really, really important, because it just facilitates the use of your cards. And then when we're talking about Paimon, you also have this one. It's a little bit slower, so I don't use this card in every deck. But what it does is really, 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 really good. Okay, I don't know if I put enough reallys in there, but it's really a good card. What it does is it gives you 2 elemental dices in the end of every turn in the next 2 turns. So in the end it gives you 4 elemental dice, and not only that, it gives you a huge hand of elemental dices in the start of your turn, in the next turn. So even though it's a little slow, it will give you a really good advantage. Not only it's slow, but it's kind of hard to play as well, because it's not gonna be every day that you're gonna have 3 elemental dice that are the exact same type. So it's not really easy to use. Sometimes you're not gonna have that. It's a little bit cost deficient. So yeah, it is what it is, but it's definitely not a bad card. It's very useful. Another card that I love is this one. This one just costs you 1 elemental dice, and I love the fact that it just costs 1. And then in the next turn you get to re-roll your dice one more time. And re-rolling, as you know, is a great advantage because it will just discard the unnecessary elements and give you more elements that can randomly be more efficient. So it's a good thing. Not only that, but the actual turn that you play it, you can roll it all of your dice once. So if you have a really bad hand, you can just get this card and you can save your turn and you can turn it into a good hand of dice. Now when we're talking about elemental dice, I want to talk about Ningguang as well. Ningguang's card, which is called Toss Up, is definitely a lifesaver as well. It does not cost you any elemental dice and you can re-roll your dice twice. So as well, it can be a great lifesaver when talking about elemental dices. I don't know if there is anything else. I also love to use this card because I switch characters a lot, and every time you switch characters you have to spend 1 elemental dice. If you have Dawn Winery, it doesn't cost you any elemental dice, so you can keep them, you can use them for attacks. It's in the long run it's useful. The deck that I play, it focuses on freezing the opponent, so it kind of slows down my opponent a little bit, and having this card there to allow for my character to move around a little bit more while my opponent is frozen, so I can do different attacks on him and I can do different strategies on him, is really powerful. That's everything I wanted to say about that. And I just want to say 2 more things. These things are important and I want to focus on them right now. The first thing, I need water. I'm not drinking anything. Feels like I'm about to die. Also, I want to remind you, if you're watching this video, remember to drink some water. Water is really good for all of your body, for your organs, for your kidneys, for your lungs. It will save your life, man. Just drink some water. Last 2 things I wanted to talk about, and I'm gonna try to play a few games as well to try to show you what I mean by that. Is, first off, whenever you're starting to play, whenever you're building your deck, whenever you are starting your little turn, always, Ito is on the move. Always, and I mean always, have a strategy. Always think of what you want your turn to look like. It doesn't mean that you're always going to be able to do it, but always plan ahead on what do I want my turn to look like. For example, if I'm using my freeze deck that I was showing you a moment ago, what I want to be trying to do first is trying to get Ganyu and trying to use her special attack so that I can hit all of my opponents. Not only it's gonna do damage to everyone, but also it will enable me to use that special card that she has, where the next attack that she does like that, it will do extra damage to all of them.
Best flavor in the
In
world.
the end of the
The
turn, it
sweet,
can do
sweet taste
9
of victory.
damage in total throughout the different opponents, and it can kill people that are not even in play, which is really powerful. Of course, I'm not saying it's the most powerful thing in the world. There is a few bursts more powerful than that. There is a few things more powerful than that. But what I'm saying is I'm already thinking that that's what I want to do. So that's going to be my focus. And why am I saying that? I'm saying that because if you have if you have two strategies that you want to do, or if you have three things that you want to do at the same time, what your turn is going to look like is you're going to put an artifact in someone, and then put a weapon in somebody else, and then you're going to switch to a character, and then after you switch to that character, you're going to switch back to the other one, because you're going to be all over the place, and you're going to be wanting to do every single thing that every opponent, every character can do, and you're going to fail. You're just not gonna win like that, because your turn is limited. Your turns are limited. Your time is limited when playing this, so focus on one thing. Of course, you know the saying, don't put your eggs in all your eggs in the same basket. That's true as well. So what I want to say is, of course you're gonna have a plan, of course you're gonna have a strategy, but the second thing that I want to say before I end my 5 advices is always have a plan B. Okay, you always need to have a plan, but the second thing I want to say is always have a plan B. And why do you need to have a plan B? You need to have a plan B because your main plan is not always going to be easy to do. Sometimes I don't draw Ganya's card, other times I don't have ice elemental dices, other times I don't have anything that equips with Ganyu to help her strategy prosper. I don't draw her artifact or whatever. And it's good to always have a plan B. It's good to always have some cards in your deck that can be very, very useful and very, very powerful, even if you don't have the main cards that you're looking for, even if you don't have your strategy pan out exactly like you want. You still have that secondary plan that you can just go to when you don't have your strategy pan out exactly like you want. So always have a plan, but always have a plan B as well.
So that's everything that I wanted to do for this video. Please don't miss out on my next video, where I'm going to be showing you some examples on how to apply the different tips that you learned today on real life games. I'm going to be playing an NPC and also going to be playing co-op. So stay tuned, subscribe, and nice to see you.